Hello, all you beautiful souls out there. My name is Devan Hubert, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I have with me the lovely and wonderful Miss Katie, I believe Lau is your last name.
Well, yep.
Lail, Katie Lail, and she is the Addiction Wellness Coaching Supervisor for a beautiful nonprofit that I recently discovered called We Face It Together. And she's in Sioux Falls, where the temperature is only like 73 degrees today, and I'm here roasting in Baton Rouge with a lovely 105, and I love the heat for that. Katie, how are you today?
I'm doing so good. I'm just really grateful to be here, to be able to spend this time with you and to just kind of share my story and, get to know you a little bit better through this process.
Amen and amen. And so in this episode, we're going to be talking a lot about crystal meth, y'all. Katie and I both have our addictions of fucking around with Miss Tina. Ooh, that bitch. Then we're going to talk about the nonprofit Face It Together. And towards the end, it's a beautiful nonprofit. It's not like the anonymous movement. Y'all all know I've been through Crystal Meth Anonymous, Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, all the anonymous and everything like that. And I find to Face It Together to be more open minded, more yielding, more negotiable, more relevant, more 2022, and not anti women, and not overly religious, and it's not religious at all. The word mindfulness came up in my research of this nonprofit rather than higher power. And so we're going to talk about that later on. But first, we're going to talk about Katie to see what her motivation was to get into this and to see how this program helped her before now she's helping other people. And this is the most beautiful thing, the way it's supposed to go. We suffer, we get help, that we realize that we got help, and we don't take it for granted, and we don't, you didn't go run off to go live a quiet, successful, happy, peaceful life. You're stopping to give back and to help somebody else. And that's what it's all the fuck about to me. So tell us, about your history with the methamphetamines. I know this started in your home when you were super young, both your parents. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So it's funny because, like, thinking back, like, both of my parents used drugs. They were both IV meth addicts as well. And I didn't know that, like, when I was younger, like, I didn't quite comprehend that. But, like, in my mind, like, I remember being really young, and in my mind, like, I knew that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do drugs. Like, I just knew that I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. Like, I just always wanted that escape. I didn't really understand what that meant, but, things kind of progressed, and I did when I was probably like 13, 14. I did start to kind of catch on, like, "Oh, I think my parents are drug addicts." Like, I think that's actually what's going on here. And I remember, being 13 and I found meth and like a big ball of meth in my mom's closet. And I brought it up to her. She goes, "Oh, I found that in the couch. I thought that was yours. I've been meaning to talk to you about it." And I'm like, "This is the first time I've ever seen meth. Like, this is your approach to that." So it was just always like a really like interesting situation growing up for me. But it was around that time that my mom kind of got really out of control. She started taking off. She would be gone for days at a time. And she'd leave me with my younger siblings who are 6 and 8 years younger than me. And, I often was, their primary caregiver. And when you're, 13, 14, you don't have resources. You don't have anybody to reach out to and be like, "Hey, I'm struggling. Can you help us get some food?" Or, "We don't have electricity." Like, it's like you just play it cool because you don't want DSS coming in and taking you, because that was always like the biggest fear, is being taken away. In retrospect, maybe it would have been a blessing, but at the time it was terrifying. But going through that, I remember I was 15 years old, and the only time my mom would ever really hang out with me is if we were partying together. And so, we would drink together and whatever. And we were hanging out at her boyfriend's house, and she was using meth. And so now she was openly using meth in front of me. And I just said, "Hey, can I get high with you?" And she's like, kind of like hemmed and hawed. And she's like, "All right, well, let's do it." And so we got high for my first time. She'd just gotten some money for student loans. She took me to a casino in Minnesota. We spent 2 days partying at the casino. She snuck me in. It was like the coolest experience of my life because I got to hang out with my mom and like see this lifestyle that she was living. And then, like coming down for the first time, and I was like, I'm never going to do that again. That sucked. But as it turned out, like it had already gotten a hold of me. Within a few weeks of trying meth, I was shooting up meth. I was in high school and had a few other friends that I used with, but the primary person that I used with was my mom. And that was kind of the beginning of where my drug use started. And so I spent the next few years getting in trouble, spending time in like juvenile detention centers, getting sent to boot camps, getting out, trying to do well, but just going right back to the same old thing. So that was where it all began for me.
Okay, thank you for that breakdown. Tell me, so you started shooting up a few weeks after you first did it. So the first time you did it, did you smoke it? Did you swallow? Like, how did you take it the
I
first?
snorted it. Yep, we did lines all the way up to Minnesota. We stopped at every bathroom, did a line off the back of every toilet that we could find. So,
Oh, the good old days.
yeah.
Tell me, so you were doing this to hang out with your mom. Do you think that, well, like you said, it might have been better if you hadn't been taken away. So would you say that really got into drugs more so for the community, rather than the narcotic itself?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I don't know that I've ever really reflected on that, but I do remember, like, the first few times I got high, I don't even know if I enjoy this, but I enjoyed the lifestyle that was attached to it because there was always people there, that you always had a purpose, like, you always had somebody, like, knocking on your door, and that felt good to me. I was a shy kid, like, I was just, like, desperate for that attention and, like, to have this, like, just instant group of people that were your people, that felt good to me.
Bingo. That is one of the main points that I always try to drive home when people get like, when they don't understand people who use drugs, or for God's sakes, they get judgy
Mhm.
about us. One of my big things that I try to get inside of people's heads is that it's not always about the dope. When I was homeless and when I was on drugs myself, there was so much community out there on those streets. And then whenever I see documentaries, a lot of times on television or in the media, in the news or whatever, is always showing like the meth head with no teeth and their skin peeling off running across the field naked. But I'm like, that is a thing, absolutely, but that's not the only thing. Sometimes when I was homeless though, and I couldn't find food anywhere else, I could go to a trap house. I could go to a meth house and they would feed me when they turned me away from the VA and I couldn't go to my siblings, you know. So it's not, when I got kicked out of Lakewood Church in Houston, Texas, that ripped my community away. And like exactly like your words were, when I found the drugs again, or when they were offered to me again, I began to accept them. And I had a purpose again as a dealer. I felt wanted. I was valued. All of those things went along with that. So it's not really just the drugs. When you first shot, do you remember like the first time you did the IV drug uses and you injected it? Did you do it to yourself? Did someone else do it to you? And do you remember how it felt?
So the crazy thing was like I was so afraid of needles. Like I was like, I'm not gonna shoot up like that. I'm not going to. But the thing that got me is like my mom was shooting up with all my friends. And I'm like, well, fuck that. Like I don't want to be left out. Like I don't want to be the only one. Like anybody got a oil so I can smoke that? And so I was like, I'm just gonna try it. And it was actually my friend's boyfriend. And I let him do it for me the first time, but it was after the first time I was doing it by myself. I just picked it up right away. It seemed more comfortable for me than, you know, letting somebody else poke around in my arm. So
Well, you're bold with it. it took a while for me. I let the guys do it first, and then eventually, I transitioned, and after fucking up many veins and I got, all these scars and shit, then I took to it. And oddly enough, it felt like a sense of accomplishment learning how to inject
Mm.
myself, you know?
I think for me, like, what the first time that I had to go to treatment, like, as a kid, like, I didn't so much, like, fantasize about the drugs, but, like, I fantasized about, like, how badass, like, I felt that I was able to shoot up for myself when I was 16 years old, Like, that's the thing that kept rolling through my mind. I was like, "I don't care if it's just water, like, I'll just do it." Like, I didn't even care at that point, I just felt like so I understand that sense of accomplishment, like, it felt I don't know, I was weirdly proud of it.
Me too. Like I totally get it. You said you first went to treatment just now at the age of 15?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure. It was either 15 or 16. I got sent away for my first time and I went to treatment for like a 9 month, like boot camp type treatment thing. So I was like remanded to the state. I was there for 9 months, got out and was sent to live with my grandparents after that. So yeah.
So, I'm gonna circle back around to, like, your initial treatment in a second here. I read so you first got arrested the first time when you were 19, and then
Mhm.
later on something else happened. Talk to me about that first arrest at 19.
So that was the eye opener for me. Cause I mean, I'd been arrested before, but it was like you're young, you don't have like any like charges, you're not in jail, you have like a whole supportive team trying to like help you out. But when I was 19, I got arrested for my first meth charge. And I remember going to county jail and I had to sit there for 6 months, like not knowing like what my sentence was going to be, like when my next court date was going to be. And honestly, like just having nobody give a shit that you're in distress. There's nobody there trying to help you or make your situation better anymore. You're an adult. And it was during that time that my mom moved to Denver and I just felt like super abandoned by her. And like we had a whole bunch of like just bad experiences leading up to me going to jail. But that was like the first time in my life that I like got some perspective and I'm like, I don't want to be fucking doing this anymore. Like I don't want to grow up and be living the lifestyle that my mom is living when I'm her age. Like I don't want this. So that was the first time that I wanted to quit using. And I had some, like, marginal success after that, but, like, I had no idea how to not use, like, that was my lifestyle, that was all that I was aware of.
Okay. And then I see that you were arrested 3 years later, and then this time it was federal. So what happened?
So, it was actually quite a bit longer than 3 years later. So after jail, I got into a relationship with a guy who I loved desperately, and I was also very dependent on, and he wanted to be sober when we got together, but that was kind of like not not that wavered quite a bit. And so, I would do really well and then he would go back to using and I would just jump off that cliff with him every time. Like I was just like, so gung ho to like maintain this relationship. And we were together for almost 9 years. And then we had a series of, just events. We tried to have kids, weren't able to. Went through all that and, so I left him. And it was after I left him, like, I was just hurt and I just had felt like so out of control for so long. And like I had been sober for, about 3 years at that time. And I relapsed. And from the day that I relapsed, I was like, until like 6 months later, that was when I got arrested. But that's when I started selling drugs. And that's a whole another beast in itself. And I don't think I would have ever quit if I wouldn't have gotten arrested by the federal government.
Yeah, it's interesting how you're saying so much interesting stuff, and I'm taking my notes so I can keep up with your well trove of knowledge. It's interesting how that works. So when SWAT kicked my door in and came and nabbed me when I was selling drugs, if there was an odd sense of relief to
Mm.
interrupt the trajectory that I was on, was your arrest that dramatic? Was there a SWAT team? How did they get you? Tell me. Bring us into the room.
Okay, so, like, I had people that were getting arrested and, like, people are, like, calling you, like, saying, "Hey, just so you know, when I got arrested, they were asking me about you." Like, they wanted information on you. So they're coming. They're going to pick you up at some point. So I knew, but and so I'd been getting stuff in the mail and just gotten a big shipment in the mail, and I'm like, "All right, I gotta get rid of all this." But I'd already gotten rid of my scale, I'd gotten rid of all the stuff, and, like, of course, I didn't wanna, like, rip myself off, so I still had a whole bunch of heroin, a whole bunch of meth in my house, and I was with the guy that I was seeing at the time, and we were just gonna kind of, like, dump it off the next day, and so we were literally packing our bags, but, we just gotten this good meth in the mail, so we're also higher than a freaking kite, really struggling to, like, get out the door, get going. So I think when they came to arrest us, we'd been having sex all night. I'm pretty sure that he was maybe wearing, like, a devil's outfit. Tr and, like, they knocked on the door, and, like, I'm just, like, trying to pull it together quick. I had every intention to answer the door, but, I'm like, hold on," but it didn't matter. They kicked in the door, came in, guns blazing. It was a whole, like, federal SWAT team, the whole thing, and it was it was scary, like, it was surreal for sure.
I'm here for the devil costume.
That whole night, like, it was just, too much, but yeah. I wish that I would've, like, if I could have had, like, cameras on, like, what that whole situation looked like, I don't even know. I can't even imagine,
Hmm. Well, maybe you'll write a book one day and we can all read in great detail.
right?
I heard you say heroin. So were you using heroin too, or were you meth exclusive?
I was meth exclusive, like, my sisters used heroin, a lot of people that I knew used heroin, and I sold it for a short period of time, like, because of the profit margin. I'd never tried it. I was going to at one point, but that same guy that I was dating, like, we'd been up for a few days doing meth, and he was just gonna do a little bit of heroin, and that was the day that I was gonna try it, but I remember him shooting it up, and, like, I remember him just, like, falling back and, like, all his muscles, like, tightening up, and it just scared me so bad, like, it was just like, I was like, "I don't think I can do this." Like, I just don't need to add another thing to my list, another issue that I'm trying to fight. So I'm really grateful that I didn't end up trying it, because I do think that would have been another beast for me. But yeah, so I never tried it. I didn't sell it for just maybe the last few weeks there. Kind of, I added that to my repertoire. So,
Yeah, it sucks when they kick the door in, man. So which federal prison were you in?
so I went to FCI Wasika, which is kind of in the middle of nowhere in Minnesota, but closest thing to where I'm at in South Dakota.
So bring me behind the walls of the prison because I'm getting Orange is the New Black going on, where you like the little, Piper running around in there trying to fix shit for everybody. Tell us, I want some dramatic prison stories. I want to trying to stab each other with the sawed off toothbrushes. I want to know about insects. Give it all to me.
So prison that I was at, like, I really thought, like, the one thing that I thought that I was gonna be able to access is cigarette. I was like, "At least I'll be able to find cigarettes there," but there was not one cigarette to be had anywhere, so that was, like, a true bummer to me, but and there was the biggest thing in the prison I was at was, like, relationships. Everybody had girlfriends, girlfriend drama. Day 1, I was, like, going down to check out, like, the rec area, and they had, like, a really big, nice gym. They had, like, a track, and I'm, like, in the gym. I'm kinda walking on the treadmill, and then I see these 2 girls, like, down at the other end of the gym, and I'm like, "Oh, cool, they're working out together," and then I was like, "Oh, no, actually, they're fingering each other right in the middle of the gym." So that was like day one of prison. And like I there was a lot of that, a lot of relationships. There's somebody twerking around every corner that you wig down. Like and for me, like it was honestly just like a culture shock. Like, I'm from South Dakota, like, I hadn't been around people, like, from big cities often, and so, like, it was a little bit overwhelming for me, like, walking in, like, having all of these different types of people, but I met some amazing people in prison that I've really stayed in touch with, and we had a really interesting dynamic in our prison because there is a program there for people who are wanting to transition from female to male. And so they would send them to our prison and they would get like the hormone therapy, as long as they were going through like the counseling process, which is great. And I think it's a really cool program. But having a male population inside the prison just adds a whole nother level of drama to to the prison.
So much drama. So, any killings, any stabbings, any murders that happened behind there?
There was no killings while I was there. There was There was often attacks, like, we didn't do, like, soap in a sock, it was locks in a sock, so they'd fill up the sock and beat people with locks, so that happened multiple times while I was there. There was Yeah, no killings while I was there, but definitely I was there with a lot of people who had done some killings. I remember just like maybe like day 3 or 4, some lady came down and asked me for sugar. And I was like, oh, yeah, I have sugar. And she left and it was fine. And I was asking my roommates, I was like, yeah, what's she here for? And they're like, oh, murder. And I was like, oh. And they're like, yeah, if you ask her how many people that she killed, she'll say one too many.
You might be next, I suppose, but
Like, well, I'm glad I gave her the sugar.
I might have got cut down over you, but how was the food?
Not as bad as I thought it would be. It was just the repetition that killed you because, every Wednesday was a hamburger day, every Thursday was chicken day, every Friday. It was just the same all the time. But I will say that people, when they have a long time on their hands, they get really creative with the commissary food. People were cooking on the iron. Like it was just crazy.
Yeah, I remember that when I was locked up, this guy, he took like a whole bunch of my honey buns from commissary and made it look like a 7-layer cake.
Yeah. I think my favorite thing was people made potato logs, which I can't even imagine how many calories are in this thing, but, like, you take a bag of potato chips and you, like, moisten it and then, like, turn it into, like, a paste, and then you put, like, meat and cheese and whatever, like, in the middle of it, and then you wrap these potato chips around it, and then you put it in hot water so the inside gets all melty. It's gotta be, like, 5,000 calories in, like, 1, and you just eat it to yourself, but, the creativity behind that is something.
Mhm. Were there any drugs and or gangs?
So the prison that I was at was actually a pretty well managed prison. So this was often the place that people went to when they had got like disciplinary actions in other prisons, like to kind of like straighten them out because there wasn't a lot of opportunity for like drugs and things like that to get in while I was there. I think it started getting worse like after as I was getting ready to leave, people were getting like drug sent in on paper and things like that. But yeah.
Okay, and I find it cool that you said that they were providing, like, the hormone therapy and everything for people transitioning. So, is this for people who got locked up while they were in the middle of transition, or was this for females who decided they wanted to transition while they were already there?
I am not sure. I don't think that they had to have been going through the process beforehand. I think that if there was that need and that desire and they wanted to do that, like I think that that was made accessible to them as long as they went through like the therapy program that coincides with that.
Right, because as I understand it, anywhere you're at, no matter locked up or free, you can't just go transition. They make you go through, I think rightfully so, see some mental health therapist to be sure is what you wanna do, that you calculate at the emotional and physical cost and toll and things like that. And then you have that throughout the whole thing. That was one of the most interesting things when I was watching, Orange is the New Black. Of course, Laverne Cox played, the trans, character in there. And there was a whole thing, with her getting her, her hormones and everything like that and denying it. And it was like a whole shit show. But that's so cool that, I mean, fuck, so this means that some people have better access to trans healthcare behind prison walls than they do out in the fucking community.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely thought that many times for sure. And like they don't go all the way through like the operation procedures or anything, but they will do like the therapy and everything up to that. So, I mean, like for some of those people that were going through that, like that was probably like a blessing that came along with going through prison because you sure didn't get it in the dental care. So,
What do you mean by dental care? Like they didn't give y'all dental care behind there?
oh, I mean, they did kind of, but like there was no like crowns or anything like that. Like if you had a sore tooth and like they couldn't just like plug it up with a filling, like they were taking your tooth out. So I did lose a few teeth in prison. We got them replaced. It's all good.
How long were you in prison for?
I was in for 3 years.
I think you were in for 3 years. Okay.
Mhm.
And for you, those of you who have not been arrested, darlings, like one day behind jail prison wall feels like an eternity because, think about it. You can't just like walk over to the fridge and get a Sprite or a glass of wine. You can't go outside at will. I believe I couldn't where I was at. We didn't go outside at all for months. But, you just can't like go do what the fuck you want to do when you want to do it and shit like that. And so 3 years is a long ass time. So kudos to you, sister, for making it out of there. You're a thug ass bitch. You're in my book. You got that mad cred. You were definitely about that life.
Yeah. I was about that life, and then I went to prison. I'm like, definitely not doing that again. Done.
Okay, so you get out of prison. So you have how many felonies at this point?
So I had gotten a pardon for my first felony because I went to school, got my degree. I was doing addictions counseling prior to my relapse and ending up selling drugs again. So I'd done a lot of really hard work, but I was still just like engaging in this unhealthy relationship. So that was my only felony I had at that time. So I got that removed. And then, so now I only have one felony. So that's a blessing, you know, but
Right, because I think it's cool that you were, sitting where you're at, with gainful employment. Me personally was a bitch. I have 4 felonies, so and none of them are pardoned. They're right there, smack dab on my record. Even the one that the grand jury threw out still shows up, and even though it says dismissed, it's still there. And so did you find it difficult to find employment after you got out? What was life after you got out of prison?
yeah, it was a mixed bag for me. So, in addition to like the employment piece, which I will talk about, but I'd gotten married a week before I went to prison. And so I came home and I was married and then I'm living with my husband for the first time in my life. And like that was like like, what is this? Like I don't know that I was prepared for all that. So that was like a huge adjustment. And like I kind of had this thing in my mind, like once I get out of prison, everything's going to be okay. But I really struggled. Like I think I had like a 6-month period of just like an adjustment disorder like type situation. Like I was just really like emotional and really struggling to like adjust to like having normal. When I first got out, I worked at a restaurant for a while that some friends of mine own, and it was a great experience. But like even there, like I just remember being like, oh my gosh, like all these like young people are just gonna think that I'm a this pile of shit because I just got out of prison and like they're just gonna make these assumptions about me. But everybody was so kind and so great and like just really like supported me and rallied behind me, which really helped like with rebuilding some of that like self-confidence and like just in who I was. And then a few years after I'd been out of prison, I'm like, okay, well, I have a bachelor's degree. Like I have like good work history before all this happened. Like I'm thinking if I go try to work for like, you know, like a social services or like, you know, I don't know, like human services, like where people are helping people that hopefully they'll be forgiving and like understand that like I went through this thing, but like that I'm actually really reliable. And it wasn't the case. Like I had so many doors just like slammed in my face the minute that they found out that I had a felony. And like just even they just didn't even give me a chance. And that was like the coolest thing because I was like hot on the pursuit and I just really wanted to do something where I'm giving back because that's where my passion is and that's what I'm good at doing. And I ran across the ad for the job at Face It Together. And like the first thing I thought, like even when reading the description about the organization, I was like, this has to be a joke. Like this sounds too good to be true. And I remember like doing my interview and I was like, okay, so I just want to, because and I had too many doors shut on my face. So I just wanted to be like open right off the bat. And I remember just saying, like, okay, so I have this felony. I did this time in prison. Like I struggled with this meth use. Like this is my story, whatever. And they're like, that's great. Like you have so much experience. You're going to help so many people. And I was like, oh my gosh, if they don't hire me, I'm going to die. And they did. And it was like such an amazing, beautiful experience. And that's how I knew I was exactly where I was supposed to be.
And how long have you been there now?
So I have been here for about a year and a half now.
Okay. And how long by your definition would you consider yourself to be a person who is, in control of themselves with reference to drug use?
So it's been this January will be 7 years for me since I've used any substances. I quit using the day that they kicked in my door. I had a year on pretrial release. And during that year, I was just scared. And I just knew that like this wasn't what I wanted to do. And that was when like I surrendered myself to like healing and like reaching out for help, developing that support group and, changing my life. So
Now you said you first went to treatment when you were 15, so that tells me that you've been to treatment, all kinds of treatment several different times. So
yeah.
talk to me about the treatment experiences that you have had and then what was different because you were a client of Face It Together. Were you ever treated?
I actually was never a client of Face It Together. So when I went, like I went through the 12-step programs. And so like I wish that I would have been able to have something like Face It Together because I think it would have changed the whole trajectory because every time that I went to treatment, it was like you have this narrow path and you have to follow this narrow path. And this is what recovery is. And so there wasn't any like leeway for anything else. So like when I wanted to do things my way or like when I didn't like connect with the higher power that they thought that I should connect with, like I just started like disassociating, like pushing it away. And so I think I went through that process almost every time, like I found that support. There's a good group of people, but like when I wasn't fitting on that path, like I just felt like I wasn't welcome anymore.
I have to say, unfortunately, that I concur. I don't care for the anonymous movement at all because it's old, it's antiquated, it's
Mhm.
not something that's updated to like the year 2022. And all of those anonymous programs are based off of Alcoholics Anonymous, and it's not like they are super original. And Alcoholics Anonymous is an old ass book, and it's very like anti women, and it's very very pro, like God and stuff like that. And so it's not really something that I think is really for most people. But like you said, it's all that was presented. It's all that was presented to me, and everything like that, and I never cared for it. And then eventually I realized that it was a fear-based program and that they're basically trying to coerce you into remaining sober out of fear. You're going to lose everything and all will be, it's like Chicken Little, the sky is falling. No matter what happens, chaos and catastrophe. And I'm all like, God damn it. Now it made me feel like I was back in the church or in the military again, where any little thing you do is chaos and catastrophe and very, very hyperbolized and very over the top. And I'm all like, this is, a use of negative energy to control the masses. And I don't care for it. And I don't think it's productive in the long term. I think the program becomes an addiction in and of itself
Mm,
all over with people.
mhm. I s It's funny that you reference it that way, that fear-based thing, because I think I still carry some of that fear with me, like, even though, like, I'm outgrown the program, but, like, that fear, like, when something starts to go a little bit wrong in my life, I'm like, "Oh, here I go again. It's a downward spiral. Like, it's all downhill from here." Like, and it's not like that. Like, that's not what my healing journey has been like. Like, I have back steps, that's life. That's how it works. But, like, I'm still, like, on this forward trajectory. Like, I just really truly believe that people are always striving to be better. And it's just everybody's own process. It's not like we just need to hold on so tightly to this thing to be okay. And we lose our individuality in that process.
Right, and the statistics don't show that the anonymous movement has been all that damn successful. And then
Mm,
I was watching a documentary, I can't remember which one had this on it. I was watching one called The History of Mental Illnesses on PBS, which is divine. Great 4 or 5 hours of your life to spend right there. And another one is called How to Change Your Mind, which is currently on Netflix. Both of them are free. Everyone check them out. Well, I guess if you have a Netflix subscription, but PBS is free. And one of them were saying that one of the guys who helped to start or started the AA, Alcoholics Anonymous movement, actually used mushrooms and psilocybin to break his addiction before he put out the AA program, but didn't tell anyone about his little
mm,
shroom experiment, his little shroom trip.
mhm.
And so you knew of this already?
It's fu My husband literally was just telling me about this the other day. He just got done watching How to Change Your Mind. That's the one that it's from. And and I was like, "Oh, like, that was definitely something that I never learned, like, in going to school and learning all about Bill W. and the whole thing. Like, nobody ever mentioned that."
No, they didn't. And it makes me just really angry because I'm like, so you got this very marvelous deliverance and you used mushrooms to do it, but you didn't tell anyone else. What you did was you went and spun a narrative that was very political and very religious, you know, and I'm sure profited from it somehow. And so that's not cool, man. And so that makes me feel like I can't trust anything else the anonymous movement has put out because you weren't transparent, you know. And now the research is showing us that we can use LSD and mescaline, ayahuasca, so whatever you want to call it, and shrooms and MDMA and all of these things therapeutically, as we did back before. I believe it was FDR created this hideous war against drugs. You know, so I just wanted to just say that about the anonymous movement. I don't care for it. I did appreciate the self reflection, and the best thing I took out of it was that not everything has to be about me.
Mm.
That was like my key takeaway. That has nothing to do with me shooting up crystal meth, though. But like the therapy and the talking was great, but it didn't really do much for my drug use. So,
I mean, and it's bad for me because I will say I did take a lot out of it. And you're right, it is that self-reflection, but the piece that was, like, important for me is the people. Like, that's what I needed, is I needed people, coming out of that, because that was the thing that was keeping me going in my youth, was the people. And so when you are trying to quit that and you don't have any people, like, that's the place you can go when you are welcomed, when you do have people and support and somebody that you can call. So that was my biggest takeaway from the whole thing, is just having that place where you can go cry and be like, "Well, I'm falling apart." And they're gonna be like, "Oh, we got your back." So that, I mean, there are a few good things that come from it for sure.
a few.
A few, yes.
So now we're going to get more granular and talk about Face It Together. We want to talk about particularly, how it's different from the anonymous movement, and
Mhm,
referencing y'all the anonymous movement a lot because when people think about drug recovery, anonymous is the first thing that pops up in most people's heads.
mhm,
Methods like harm reduction or really anything, alternative or the use of psychedelics is relatively new compared to how old the anonymous movement is and the foothold that it has on the world. I liked reading the Rational Recovery book, which was written as the antithesis of the anonymous movement. I ain't saying I agree with everything in Rational Recovery, but I do find it to be more rational and more and more practical. See what I did there? And It's more practical and down to earth and just like real people shit than the anonymous movement. And I don't feel like they're trying to cast a spell on me and, voodoo my mind and shit like the anonymous movement. So face it together. And of course, y'all, I'm going to put the website to this in the show notes. But if you're just burning to hear it right now, I'm going to tell you it's www.wefaceit together.org. And they're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. And so you had said like earlier, like you take steps back. Sometimes that's a part of life. So when I was rereading on your website, on the Face It Together website, y'all have a different term for relapse. It's some other kind of way you describe it. What is that?
Recurrence of symptoms is a big one that we use. Yeah. Recurrence of use, recurrence of symptoms. We work really hard to break the stigma. And some of that, like, I just feel like there's a lot of harmful language that's coming up, that's came out of like the anonymous movements and, the other, recovery type things. And so we really try to break that. Like we're not gonna make anybody say you're an addict, like because that's like that's such a label and it's such a harmful thing. And so we really try to switch that to, I've struggled with an addiction or I've struggled with problematic use or I would like to address my use. Like we don't want to label anybody. We don't want to make it seem like we try not to use like clean or dirty because that's like an indication that like if you're one way, it's good, and if you're the other way, that it's bad. And so we just are really we try to be very aware of the language that we use.
You fucking right. I didn't say that shit for very long, even when I was fucking with the anonymous movement, because it just sounded like a negative manifestation. Like, isn't the whole point for me to stop being an addict? But are you gonna make me stand here and call myself that just before I can speak? That's very cult like. Like you can talk, but you must say this negative thing about yourself first, so we can keep you under our thumb. Because heaven forbid you really get healed because we won't have a program anymore. They're just like the church. They like churches and, these programs don't really want everyone to get healed because then they would cease to exist. You know, you really don't need to go to a church to learn about God, or at least you might want to start off that way, but there's no reason to do that for the rest of your life. Education, you know, and the anonymous movement is no different. I refuse. I would say something like, "Hi, my name is Evan and I'm an addict in recovery," or something like that. I had to throw some sort of positivity into it because I refuse to just be like, "I am an addict and I will always be an addict." Another thing that fucked with me was that, my higher power is the Trinity. And of course, everyone can pick their own higher power, be it the duck flying in the fucking sky, the chair, your tits or whatever can be your higher power. I'm like, so if I believe in Jesus Christ, he can heal anything. Why the fuck can't he heal me of being an addict? And, it was just, there's so much shit that has never made sense. But that relapse shit, you know, to me, why can't it just be I made a mistake or made a mistake in terms of I did what I had intended not to do? Um, I don't see why it has to be catastrophe, or it has to be this whole like downward spiral just because you did a thing. What I learned from my hypnotherapy training, because I'm a licensed hypnotist as well, was that you have to be careful of the constructs you set up in your subconscious
Mm.
because you're setting yourself up for that. And when you're exposed, every time you stand there, if you call yourself an addict and you listen to the rhetoric that if you use one thing, you're going to end up in an institution or you're going to die, you're going to jail, you're going to lose everything. And the only reason you have anything you have is because of the program. you know, it's what they try to tell you. And I'm all like, my program wasn't there when I got this job. So I don't know about that. So and so,
Uh,
and so I'm saying all this to say, if you reinforce in your head that relapse is the most terrible thing in the world, the way they want you to be fearful of it, when it happens, and it kind of tends to happen, if you believe it must be catastrophe and chaos, then it will be catastrophe and chaos, not because it had to be, but because you've already set that up to happen.
mm.
So you can say something now. That's my
Oh yeah. No, like just talk about the power of language. Like
uh,
that's missed so often and like just the way that this language has been affecting people. Like, how many times in 12-step meetings did you hear, if you're not in recovery, you're in relapse? Like, it's like either one or the other. There's no middle ground. And that's scary as shit. Like, okay, so what do I need to do to make sure that I'm in whatever this recovery thing is and like by their guidelines and I need to do all these things like exactly right. Otherwise I'm screwed. And that was like my fear for a long time. And I think with Face It Together, my view on addiction, like even though like I didn't necessarily like subscribe to like this 12-step thing before, and I knew there had to be something else, like my view on addiction and wellness and all of that has grown so much since I've been here. But like I think, that they always talk about like the cycle of the stages of change, and so you go through this and then you get to maintenance, and then after maintenance, it's relapse, and then it's pre-contemplation, contemplation, and you're just always going in this cycle. But, like, we believe there's an exit. Like, we believe that you can get out of this cycle. Like, it's a cycle that you're in and then you heal. Like, we believe in that healing, which I think is something that really sets us apart.
I'm going to read a section from your website that I feel like is really, really relevant right now. And from the website, it says that the world has one data point for addiction wellness, sobriety. And y'all on the website say, we don't buy that.
Mhm.
Follows, you say, we focus on all aspects of life. We ask our members, are you more hopeful? Is your employment more stable? Are things better at home? These and many other measurements prove that our members are doing better. And doing better, not just being sober, is what gets people well. So when I read this beautiful statement here, it sounds like a person could be, and when we say harm reduction, that means not stopping all drugs. It means doing them less and less and less until eventually you're either off of them or you come to a place that you feel like you're in control again. And so it seems like maybe that allowance is being made here. It seems like it's not really defined what sobriety is for each individual. So tell us about this statement.
Yeah, I think that's really powerful. Like, so anytime we have somebody come in the door, we have them take our assessment. And our assessment, like, it doesn't ask anything about like what is your drug use like now? Like, how much are you using? Like, that is not what we think it's important to measure. Oftentimes, I believe that the use is a symptom of whatever the actual issue is. So let's focus on those issues. Let's focus on you as a person. Let's figure out what it is that your goals are. So, hey, like I'm using meth. Like I would like to quit using meth, but I don't want to quit smoking pot at this point. Like that is, I feel like I'm okay with that. Okay, that's great. Let's work with that. Or, hey, I'm drinking. I'm drinking way more than I would like to. I don't want to quit. This is what I would like my drinking to look like. All right, let's work on that. We just really want to hear like what it is that the person wants, and we want to be able to help them accomplish that goal rather than saying this is a way that you succeed. We honor that success for everybody is really different.
So how this differs from the anonymous movement, y'all, is like, so you have like a sponsor and all of this, and they're very like, you can't do any drugs at all, period. I've never stopped drinking my wine and everything like that. And, I would, my sponsor didn't really ride my ass about that or nothing like that, but he would not, for instance, have been open-minded to somebody who smoked weed. I'm like, weed is quite legal these days, but the anonymous program, last I checked, has not changed their language to say that it's okay. They don't give a fuck what's going on medically, you know, and I don't foresee a a day. Can you imagine the anonymous movement saying, "Hey, shrooms are okay and LSD is okay and MDMA is okay"? That would just destroy
Yeah.
everything that they stand for. But I felt like those people were like so full of shit because people, you go to these meetings and they're chain smoking cigarettes outside, and each one of them has their own personal pot of coffee that they can't function without. And you're gonna tell me to stop meth, but you can't go a day without smoking 2 packs of cigarettes and drinking a gallon of coffee?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure, for sure. And then as you were talking about before, like, they're like, "Oh, I didn't make it to a meeting all week and now I'm not okay." Like that has become their addiction. They're not learning how to like function as individuals in society. They're learning how to become dependent on meetings, and they're learning how to become dependent on, coffee, cigarettes, all of that.
And we're going to circle back to get on statistics a little heavier in a couple of minutes. But since you mentioned that, you feel like sometimes, or oftentimes, a lot of the issues are not the drugs itself, but the problems. When I was reviewing the statistics that you have on your website, which is also a very unique approach that you had on there like the metrics of like income, race, and stuff like that. And it seemed like from your clientele, not, people, I think it was like about 42% of the people are like below like 40,000 a year or something like that. And then maybe only 15% are like in the 90 over 100,000 range. It seems like there's some sort of correlation between like quality of life and, getting to a point where you spiral out of control with drugs. And I thought about when I was a dealer, like my higher end clientele, usually were not the people that really, appeared, they some of them didn't come around a lot. Like they only would like do drugs 4 or 5 times a year. And then that was it. Or they only did like pills and stuff like that. They seemed to be more like in control. I did have, one rich, very, very, well to do, client who I think did a bit much meth, but other than that, most of my high end people seem to keep it together. And I don't know, do you think that that's because of the better quality of life or
I I've never thought about that before. That's a really all I can do is give you my initial thoughts on it because, I think that there might be some truth to that quality of life, but like also think about think about the stigma that you face in being an addict. And so being an addict who also struggles with poverty, how further into the margins does that push you? As being a person who struggled with addiction, but has money and prestige in the community, it's easier to keep your head above water, So I that's like the first correlation that comes into my mind, that I can think of.
I concur. So since your approach is not like higher power centered, I saw the word mindfulness on your website. How does mindfulness play into what you do?
So, I think that spirituality means different things to different people. And so always trying to like any members, we call clients members, anybody that walks through the door, they're a member. So any member, like I would work with to figure out like what does spirituality mean to you? How is that important to you? But also like mindfulness, like how amazing of a skill that is. Like how amazing is it to be able to bring mindfulness into your life and help clear the clutter, that constant like movement of the mind and be able to focus on the here and now and really just rein it back. Because, a lot of times people are using to quiet just that constant chatter, just that constant activity in their mind. So helping people find that mindfulness and what that means to them.
But yeah, hearing you say that reminds me of a client that I had when I was a drug dealer who had some sort of physical ailment that caused him pain. And he was like, the only thing that brings me peace is when I do these drugs. And I would sell him a lot of meth and G. And I was like, okay, well, I'm doing the Lord's work. Hallelujah. So, you know, you,
Yeah.
you just don't know. That's why I don't believe drugs are just bad inherently. You couldn't find physical peace anywhere,
Mhm.
at all, except for when he was high on these drugs. So judge it if you will, but I advise you not to do it, people, because God's going to judge you one day. So let people go.
Yeah.
Now,
And giving people the autonomy to decide what it is that's good for their lives rather than like us determining that for them.
yeah, that's very, very empowering because you're not saying like how so many, I mean, medical facilities, mental health facilities, not just the anonymous movement. When you check in there, they're like, "You're a dumbass dope fiend. We know what's better than you, so set your ass here and do what we're going to tell you. Then we'll let you leave when we decide that you're able to." A recurring theme that I saw through your website and when I was researching you was that's like there was a time you couldn't see the best in yourself, and now that's a big deal for you is helping somebody see what's good in them even when they don't. So I remember when I was homeless and walking the streets of Houston, I would always walk with my head down. and looking at the ground, it seemed like it took way too much effort for me to either look straight ahead and for God's sakes to look up, like to heaven or anything like that. I felt so like hollow, as a human. I didn't feel like there was anything left in me at all. There was no light.
Mm.
So talk to us about and people had to see that light in me to make me believe that I could actually continue to live. So how important is that?
It's so important. I think it's everything because if people can't see that sense of purpose and value within themselves, like they're not going to invest in anything. If they can't see anything beyond where they're at right then and there. And like I have a member that just comes to my mind like right away. And we're often operating from like a deficit model, like trying to tell people what's wrong with them and what they need to fix. Like I really want people to understand what's right with them and why they should work forward because they have this to offer. And I just remember him sitting here for our maybe our like third session. And I was like, what do you like about yourself? And it was just silent. And he could not come up with one thing, like one thing that was worth him, just even continuing to live for. And, I generally don't like to like feed those things to people. Like I want people to recognize it for themselves. But I started telling him the things that I seen in him and I really started pushing him. And it's just cool because I met with him yesterday and he is getting ready to go to college for data sciences and he has just grown so much and like he said things are going pretty well, like I can see myself doing pretty good and like he's starting to grow this confidence and like just like seeing that transformation as he started to believe in himself. Like I don't think if he wouldn't have had somebody in his corner saying, like, if that's the way you want to do this, I trust you. I trust you. Like, even if it was something that I was like, I don't know if this is going to work for him, but like just being able to say, I trust you, like, and being that first person that believed in him really just changed his life.
Child, a little bit goes a long damn way, especially when nobody around you is acting like they believe in you. I mean, I've been there before, you know. So I want to talk about the pricing structure. And usually I wouldn't get into this, but since y'all have it displayed out on your website for all the world to see, I think that transparency speaks to how much you believe in what you do. I think that the rates, they start at like 80 an hour or something like that, which is on par with mental health, anywhere else that I've been. But you also have programs to help sponsor and pay for this for people if they can't afford it themselves. I think the verbiage on your website reads like, you have a lot of generous sponsors and stuff like that. I wanted to read a testament though from someone on your website. Her name is Lexi. And what Lexi has to say about this is, I'm a single mom, so about 90% of my disposable income goes to my son, and he is the most important thing in the world to me. But I also knew that I had to get better, and I had to figure out what was wrong with me. I was so nervous I wouldn't get the financial help from Face It Together, but they said there were lots of options and to not worry about it. It really took the stress away. So talk to us about how you help people afford what you're offering.
So we there's two things that we do. So as you've seen, we're very data focused and we use that data to be able to get grant funding so that we're able to say what we're doing is working. We're making a difference in people's lives. Can you help us not make finances a barrier for people to receiving the services that they need? So that is one thing that we do. And we do a lot of fundraising as well. We're just getting ready to do a multi-state march. So on September 24th, we'll do something called a March into the Light, where we do a symbolic walk into the light. And then we do like a 5K and a fun run and just this event. And we raise money and we just reach out to our community and like ask for this support and this help. And we do a golf tournament every year and we do these big things so that we can be able to provide those social good sponsorships to people because it is hard when you want help. And I go into the prison. I have so many guys there. They're like, I was trying to get into treatment. I was trying to get into treatment, but I didn't have the money to do it. We don't want that to be a thing anymore.
Yeah. When I was in rehab, there was a guy who had to stop treatment because the insurance cut off the funding midway, which was like one of the most asinine and insane things I've ever seen in this entire universe. The man's here for help, strung out on drugs, and oh, well, you got to go because, the money's not coming in anymore. So what the fuck do you think's going to happen? But I love the fact that you fundraise. I have never met a mental health or emotional support facility that does fundraising like that. And what y'all are doing reminds me of my fundraising days in the military. I used to do all of that. I used to host golf tournaments, sell popcorn balls, burger burns, whatever kinds of ways. So have your assistants add my email to the list so that when you do these things, I can send y'all some money.
Absolutely. We'll definitely add you to our list. We'll take you up on that offer.
Do y'all throw like social events like galas or like dances or anything like that?
You know, we we don't currently. Like the march is a kind of a big event that we do. It's open to the public. You don't have to fundraise or, donate to be able to participate. It's just an event in honor of people getting well. So that's like the big thing that we do. We We've done, like, a few things in the past. I don't think that we quite got the engagement that we were hoping for in the community at the time, but, it definitely is something that we may be interested in doing again in the future, so
There's always room for growth, and I love that. And I just have a few more questions. Thank you for hanging with me.
yeah.
I wanted to touch on the experience because y'all, this website, you must check it out. It is so cool. I love that the color scheme kind of echoes my website a little bit. Just the tip green on the bullet goes on. And we were inspired by Breaking Bad when we designed my website. So, we're all connected here. Maybe we'll have lunch with Heisenberg someday.
There we go, yeah.
So on the website, you can go and get a real sense of what the experience is from the time you do the first intake, like she was saying, you remember when you walk through the door to getting you from point A to where you want to be. The thing that stood out to me is the access that you have. So like there's like unlimited texting to like your counselor and stuff like that. So just kind of give us a breakdown of what it feels like to be a member and what would happen when someone walked through the door.
Yeah, and you don't even have to walk through the door, like, we wanna meet people where they're at, like, I have members that are exclusively phone calls, I have members that are exclusively Zoom, like, we will meet you where you're at. If you are not ready to talk to somebody on the phone, text us, we'll text you back. Like, whatever we have to do to meet you where you're at, that's what we'll do. We're really flexible, so, like, if you wanna get in touch with us, go to our website, engage with our chat bot. There's a web form that you can fill out, or call, text, whatever you prefer. But what we do is we go through, we do some of those like initial assessments to really like find you the best match for a coach. We want everybody to like have somebody with like the closest personal experience. We want to be able to have everybody feel like they're able to connect with somebody. So we have a first impressions team that will take the time, match you up with the right coach for you, and then from there, they'll do kind of a wellness consult, try to kind of determine what it is, like where you're struggling, what you want your goals to be, like what you're hoping to gain out of working with Face It Together. And then usually within a week of reaching out to us, you'll have your first appointment scheduled. How many times have somebody been in crisis and they call out for help and they're like, oh, we'll get you in a couple months. Like, that's not us. Like, we'll get you in right away. And I think the biggest thing that I would like to stress is like, we just want to treat everybody with that dignity and respect. We want everybody to feel welcomed and valued. And being a member, I think that that's probably the biggest feedback that we get is we always felt like somebody cared because we do.
Well, it's more than I can say for the federal government, I think about how accessible you are, and I think about, it was the government that made this war on drugs, but then they also made it impossible to get help for it too. It's like they set the country up to fail. And but y'all, I love this website so much. It's already up on the resources page on my Sex, Drugs, and Jesus website because the moment I saw it, I was like, they're different. I want to really, really, collaborate with them a lot moving forward.
Mm.
Um, So I talked about the statistics earlier. Y'all must check out the statistics. Their statistics are so different. They have statistics like based on like people's quality of life improvement. So, and then they also give statistics on like people's loved ones, like and how they're affected and everything like that. I thought that that was so open-minded and open-hearted of y'all. So, why do you include loved ones in your statistics, and what advice would you give to people's loved ones who has a family member that's using drugs?
So that is another thing that I should have mentioned before, but that really makes us stand out. Not only do we help people who are struggling with an addiction, we also help people who have loved ones who are struggling with addiction. So we have coaches who specifically help people's loved ones. And so whether the person struggling with addiction is engaging in services or not, the loved one can get the support that they need, because that is an extremely isolating place to be, is having a loved one who you are scared is going to die from, their addiction, and not knowing how to support them, and, watching them pull away. So we are that person. Like, we'll help you learn how to support them. We're, again, different from the anonymous programs in that we don't, believe that, you just like lovingly detach. Like, we believe that you learn how to positively enable the person to make changes. And so we just take a really different view on that as well.
Lovingly detached. Is it? I think Al-Anon might be the version of the anonymous movements, for the family members of the people going through the addiction. I've never been through it because, I'm the drug user in my family.
Yeah.
You know? So wait, they tell people to lovingly detach. What the fuck does that mean? Is that like politely to say bye, bitch? I don't. What the fuck is lovingly detached?
Exactly. It's like, oh, I hope you don't die. I really care about you, but I'm done. Like, that essentially what it is, And I think it's like just a way to try to help people feel at peace with it. But like, first of all, how helpful is that? And like, what is the thing that generally like pushes people to make changes? It's the people that care about them and that support them and that are on that journey with them. So yeah.
I wonder if that's why, because one of my siblings, when I was, going through everything, they never had a conversation with me. They just assumed the worst. They texted me saying never to show up to their house again and stuff like that. I had gone over there and stolen anything and done anything. I had just gotten arrested. Like, I just really, I was in the, getting into the thick of it, but I had never done anything that they could say, you hurt me, so don't come back. So
Yeah.
they assumed. So I wonder if they heard this lovingly detached thing. Well, I'm gonna tell you, lovingly detached don't work. It just feels like rejection.
Mhm.
Okay.
How much, and that is the current study that we are working on, is when a loved one is receiving coaching to learn how to, instead of lovingly detach, lovingly support their loved one in a healthy way, how that affects the person struggling with an addiction, like what positive effects that has on them. Because we're starting to see a pretty strong correlation with the fact that when these people get that support from their loved ones, that positively affects their experience with addiction as well.
Any kind of positive energy is gonna help you, but it's so hypocritical of the anonymous movement to claim to be a religious program. But in the Hebrew Bible, the Lord says that He's married. He's married to the backslider. He's married to people who are making mistakes, and it doesn't matter how far you fall. He's attached to you. There is nothing about detach. You know, in terms of like the Lord. So, okay. So then that's I think we've covered everything that, that I wanted to talk about. I thank you for going over time
Mhm.
with me. And so I just wanted to get your, whatever it is you have to say to anybody who thinks that recovery from meth is not possible, in any other closing last words you'd like to say.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there was a good chunk of time where I wasn't sure recovery from meth was possible, but it definitely is. It definitely is. It's just that love and support and the growth. And, I watched so many people recover. So many of our coaches have struggled with a meth addiction, and it's just there. And, other than that, I think the biggest thing that I would like to say is don't be afraid to reach out. Whether we end up being the right program for you or not, just having a ear to listen and some support. Like, don't ever hesitate to reach out. It can definitely change your life.
All right. Thank you so very much, my dear. It's been wonderful having you, and I will look forward to hearing from you about how I can give you money.
Thank you so much. It has been so good getting to know you. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you all so much for taking time to listen to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. It really means everything to me. Look, if you love the show, you can find more information and resources at sexdrugsandjesus.com or wherever you listen to your podcast. Feel free to reach out to me directly at thevannon at sexdrugsandjesus.com and on Twitter and Facebook as well. My name is Thevannon. It's been wonderful being your host today. And just remember that everything is going to be all right.